It's good to be here. I'll give you a little bit of background on me. I really come from the graphic design world. And about 10 years ago, I was doing fine in my career. I describe it as, like climbing this ladder over time. And I wasn't at the top, but I could see the top, and I could see up there. I was like, I don't know, is this really what I want to do with my life? And another way to think about it is you go to a store and try on a jacket and you're like, really? And everyone's going, hey, that jacket looks great. You should get that jacket. But just the profession of graphic design as I was practicing it just didn't quite feel right. So what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to take you through a journey and a process that I've gone through. How do you unlock ingenuity in people? How does that happen? And why? So here's New York City after the hurricane a couple years ago. Subways were flooded, but we're also looking at a lot of challenges. And I believe that we're at this tipping point, that the relationship between man and the planet is out of whack, right? It's in an unsustainable state. So it's not like a tree hugger thing. It's just we cannot keep doing the same stuff we're doing and expect a positive outcome. So how do you get there? Here's my graph. You've got challenges increasing over time at the top, and solutions are almost flatlined, right? So how do we fill this, what I call the ingenuity gap? And this isn't just ideas, right? It's ingenious ideas. And when I talk about ingenuity, it's clever, practical uses of existing resources to solve problems. And I think of it as related to innovation, but not quite the same. So ingenuity comes out of people. Innovation is what can come out of that, products, services, but it's using existing resources. So in 2003, I moved from San Francisco, where my firm was, to the coast of Maine with my family, and really just trying to get out of the rat race. I was burned out at running a graphic design studio, and I commuted back and forth, but really working half-time on the design business. And I had gone to see a lecture by an architect named Samuel Mockbee, and he was teaching at the Rural Studio in Alabama. And he formed something called, he was teaching at Auburn. He formed something called the Rural Studio, where he took these young architects from Auburn University 3 hours away to Hale County, Alabama, which was one of the poorest counties in America. And I saw this presentation. It really blew me away because the projects were amazing. These kids had to conceive, fund, design, and build houses, community centers, baseball parks, fire stations, right? The Whitney Biennial had a whole room devoted to these projects, so they were amazing. But what really struck me is what I believed was the impact on these young architects, that there was something happening in the short period of time of their education where they're immersed in this poor county that was very unfamiliar, and they had to be ingenious about the way they approached architecture. So in 2003, I started this program called Project M, the M standing for Mockbee, who inspired me. He had passed away just before I started this. And I gathered a group of young creative people in an unfamiliar place. This year was rural Maine, near where I live. Next year, we were in Costa Rica in the rainforest at a conservation area. Then we went down to New Orleans after Katrina. We bought this used ambulance and drove it down. I'll talk about some of these projects when we get into the process. East Baltimore, if you've seen The Wire, you know what that's like. This is Iceland, Reykjavik, Iceland, right after their financial collapse, 2008, I think it was. So it's rural Connecticut. We did a project called Pizza Farm to sort of encourage people to take advantage of the locally grown food. This is Detroit. We built some horseshoe pits in a vacant lot. This is rural Alabama. I bought a shipping container and they converted it into this rolling design studio. This is Frankfurt, Germany. We were brought in to connect the town of Frankfurt, or the city of Frankfurt, to the town of Offenbach. And we did this highly illegal project where we changed the road signs to Offenfurt and Frankenbach. So this is the way I think we're going about it now, traditional problem solving. You're just following the best practices that we've been kind of employing in the past, And this exists up in this quadrant. So traditional problem solving, the certain and known. So ROI is an example of wanting to know what a predictable outcome, what's our return on investment. And I believe we have to operate down. And we've developed these practices, we call it rapid ingenuity, to address the uncertain and unknown, come up with new solutions. So my partner and I, a couple years ago, decided that the most fulfilling, creative, satisfying thing we were doing was Project M. And then we had this firm called C2 that was doing all this big brand work in Silicon Valley. And we said, you know what? We just can't keep going like this anymore. Let's just close the brand studio, open up Future, and take Project M Pro. So take a lot of the things we had learned over 10 years of doing Project M and actually make a viable business out of it. Our studio is at just south of San Francisco at Half Moon Bay, a famous surf spot called Mavericks. That's what it looks like. Inside the studio looks like that. And a lot of what we do, we purpose-built this as an ingenuity lab to unlock ingenuity and solve big problems. So these are the 6 practices that we've come up with, and I'm going to take you through projects that show each of these. Be bold, the dent you want to make in the universe, as Steve Jobs called it. Also, we think of it as, what's the big, bold challenge you want to start with, right? Get out, and this isn't about like ethnographic research, finding out how people use products or go about their daily lives. This is really getting out of our orthodoxies and ways of working into unfamiliar territory, both physically and creatively. Think wrong, this is like the creative engine of our practice, and I'll talk more about what that means. But our brains are designed to follow these synaptic pathways over and over again. So, me talking here, I don't have to think about it, right? I have an idea and a vocalization because I have the superhighway between those things. Well, if you're trying to solve creative problems in new ways, you can't just follow those same pathways. Make stuff. You're from the creative industry, so this is familiar, but a lot of times in business, they can just talk about shit over and over again and never get anywhere. So making stuff is about the learning that happens through prototyping and just stop talking and start making. Bet small. This is, I think, the second most important thing. Oftentimes when you're trying to do something radically new and different, there's a lot of fear involved. I'm going to fail, I'm going to look stupid, we're going to lose money, I'll get fired, right? So by framing it as small bets, you know what, I don't know if this is going to work, but let's just try a small bet and see what happens. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, we can try a small bet. Another way we talk about it is an affordable loss, right? So it's, if it's Microsoft, it might be $100,000. If it's a small nonprofit, it might be $100 on Monday. So what's an affordable loss? What's a small bet? And this just starts the whole thing going so you don't hit the wall. And then move fast. So how do you take those small bets and then kind of leverage them into this kind of forward movement and make something happen? So I'm going to take you through 6 different projects, some of which are Project M and some of which are Future, and you'll see which are which. Project M, remember, is a student thing where I'm trying to take young people from college before they get jobs and kind of infuse them with this process and immerse them in rapid ingenuity. And then the Future stuff is taking larger organizations and using this process as well. So be bold. This guy, Daniel Birnbaum, is he is the most fearless CEO I've ever worked with. He's the CEO of SodaStream. You might know about them. They make this home carbonation machine. This one was designed by Yves Bahar, famous industrial designer. And these guys, SodaStream is a 100-year-old company. It was started by the Gilbey's Gin Company. It was once owned by Coke, and they sold it. And a bunch of Israeli private equity guys bought it a few years ago, brought Daniel in and put him as CEO. And he was in the Israeli Special Forces at one point, so like nothing scares him. So this is one of the things that SodaStream does. The Be Bold challenge for Daniel Birnbaum was, let's go after big soda. So Coke and Pepsi, we're just going to go head to head with them. We're not just going to carve out a little piece of the beverage industry. So this they call the COTTAGE. It's one family, 5 years, over 10,000 bottles and cans. And they plunk it into public areas. This one they put in the airport in Atlanta, home of Coke. Coke immediately sued them and said, this is our intellectual property. And they came back, SodaStream said, great, go pick it up all over the world. And they backed off. And out of the Blitz process, we came up with this whole brand and positioning with him and SodaStream. I'll show you, we did 3 commercials. 3 were on the Super Bowl. This first one was banned in the UK for denigrating the beverage industry. It was actually shown on the Super Bowl. Second year, CBS wouldn't show the commercial we did. The third year, it completely changed the strategy. But the reason I want to show you this is you can see how this process kind of yields to something really tangible like a Super Bowl ad. This one we worked on with one of my colleagues, Alex Boguski.
With SodaStream, you can save 2,000 bottles a year. If you love the bubbles, set them free. SodaStream.
So I love showing that because a lot of times when you talk about, work that drives positive change or the greater good, there's this assumption of a vow of poverty. And that, it's like I have to volunteer, it's pro bono, Vista AmeriCorps, right? And we believe that some of these issues are huge opportunities to address. And that SodaStream, even though it's a for-profit, these guys want to make as much money as possible. It shows how you can actually do something valuable, drive change, and make money at it. So the next one is Get Out. And these are pretty much in the sequence that we run companies through. We were brought in by a foundation called the Legacy Foundation, which runs the Truth Campaign. You may be familiar with that. Alex Boguski also worked on that years ago. There's brilliant advertising. There's one big problem because big soda is going after mainly African and Hispanic youth in inner cities, right? And this is a group that doesn't consume advertising. So it doesn't matter how clever the commercials are. And even if they did, they don't give a shit about their health. It's so far down. So Big Tobacco has been very successful at going after this target audience and using menthol. So menthol is like the gateway drug for smoking. It's smoother, you can draw it deeper, you hold it longer, and the cancer rates are actually much higher with menthol. So it's a really devious way of hooking people. And we said to Legacy Foundation, we can't just come up with better campaigns. Let's get out and go to Detroit and see what's happening on the ground and see how we can address this. So there were 40 people, some from Legacy. We brought creative insurgents in. We had people from the community. We went out into Detroit and saw what was going on, met these guys who are rap artists who had this sneaker shop. They were just awesome. And out of that, we generated, hundreds of different ideas, a lot of which would never have happened if we were sitting, in our studio or in Washington. Some of the ideas that came out of that, some of the small bets, were trying to take back menthol in the mint green. And what we found was they didn't so much care about their health, but they did care that big soda was targeting them. It's like, fuck that. So we were taking over the basketball courts with mint green basketballs, painting the hoops and the stripes, and just trying to get people aware of what was going on, what's up with the mint dodgeballs with 1,200. That was how many people are hooked today. Thinking wrong. This came to me about 10 years ago. I was working with an investment management firm, and they had hired a behavioral psychologist from Cornell to come in and advise them on how other investment managers, these were guys managing billions of dollars, were victims of what they called their heuristic biases, right? So that how can we exploit how other investment managers were just like victims of their own brain function? Simplest way to think about this is shark attack off the coast of Australia, and people in Half Moon Bay, California, stay out of the water, right? So what's going on there? This is your brain. A, shark attack, bad. B, stay out of the water. So there's a super highway between shark attack, really, really bad. I don't want that. Stay out of the water. You have an input and a behavior that is there's no statistical correlation, right? So it's an example of how efficient our brains are at immediately going to a file folder which influences our behavior, right? So I started thinking about the creative process and how, I bet I'm a victim of this, right? I bet I get a project and I go immediately, my brain, as soon as I've said that project, my brain is into a file folder full of stuff that I kind of know might be a solution to that. And I was intrigued with how do you disrupt that? And how do you go A, steaming round thing? So this is a Project M project, and one of the ways to do it is to just totally screw with the project right off the bat. So this was right at the beginning of Project M, which is a 2-week program, and they're in their get out phase where they're getting a sense of the community. And I bought a shipping container and plunked it down on the second day. And so the thinking wrong part of this was usually you sort of immerse in the community, you come up with an idea, this is what we want to do, this is our strategy, this is our execution. I said, here's a shipping container, figure it out. So there was no synaptic connection between solve a problem in rural Alabama and shipping container. They had to fabricate it. So they painted it all white. It looks like that. They called it the blank lab. And the idea was to create a rolling Project M studio that they could take around the country and do projects. We got this. This was an old ambulance. We hacked the back off. We got that for free. We put it on a trailer, drove it up to Rhode Island, to RISD. They had a big conference called the Better World by Design Conference, mainly for students. There were about 1,000 students there. And we backed it up to the entrance of the theater and set it up like a photo studio. And we made everybody there sign this contract. I agreed to do something meaningful with their name and email. We gave them all a white T-shirt which said Engage, Transform on it. And then we made them get up and get their photo taken. So they looked like this. So the idea was to create this design army where if we were doing a project in Detroit or Cleveland or whatever, we just send up the bat signal and we could gather everybody there. The problem was our truck broke immediately. And then I got a grant, a $20,000 grant. We bought another one, a bigger, better one on eBay. And 4 days later, that one broke down. So the blank lab's sitting down in Alabama right now, but that's OK. We'll figure something out. Make stuff. This is all about getting to it and starting to prototype things, and it'll inform the process. So this group was really into bicycles and how do you encourage people to use bikes for everyday transportation, right? Young people specifically. And it was 2009, I think, right at the beginning of this fixie single speed movement. And we thought maybe we can leverage, ride the wave of the interest in the fixed gear bike, kind of like skateboarding or snowboarding or surfing or something. So we created this called NADA, less gas, less fat, less is more, freedom, sustainability, you are NADA. We had a website. And so the way this worked is you would join this movement. So it wasn't we were thinking wrong about a bike company. It was really about a movement called NADA. You paid $100, you got your photo on the home page, and your membership card was a raw steel bike frame. So we got these frames made in Taiwan. They were about $50, and then there was shipping and handling and stuff. And the idea was if somebody got their own steel bike frame they had to build up, that the relationship between the consumer and the product would be totally different. And we sold out almost immediately. And we had 120 frames. That was our small bet. It was time to reorder and start thinking that it was kind of weird to get these frames from Taiwan and ship them all the way over and then ship them out. And we noticed that there was this bamboo growing right outside our studio that was down in Alabama. So I found out about this guy, Marty Odlin, who started something called the Bamboo Bike Studio in Brooklyn. I called him up and I said, Marty, we're doing this student project called NADA. And he came down to Alabama and helped us figure out how to harvest the bamboo. And you have to flame treat it to get the moisture out. And we started making bikes down in Alabama. We put together this bike lab, built some jigs. And this was using the technique of the Bamboo Bike Studio. So they were really nice to share that. You use carbon fiber wrap on the joints. And they kind of look like this. I call it the Gilligan bike. They're pretty funky, but they're kind of cool because you can see it's made out of bamboo. 4 of the Project M kids went down. They built their bikes and rode them to San Francisco to promote it. I got a call from the wife of the former governor of Alabama, and she heard about the bamboo thing, and she said, well, I'm trying to get bamboo grown at scale as an agricultural product in Alabama. And so we invented this brand, Alabamboo, trying to connect Alabama to bamboo like Georgia peaches or Florida oranges or Maine lobsters, and referencing farm brands like DeKalb corn. So that was a completely unexpected part of it. Then I got in touch with this guy, who's an industrial design professor at Kansas, and he came down and saw what we were doing. He said, there's a more elegant, more ingenious way to make bikes out of bamboo. And he invented this called the hex tube, where the bamboo is fabricated into slats that are then glued together over a carbon fiber core. It's called the hex tube. And it does a couple things. The tubes are stronger so they can be smaller and lighter, but the most important thing is it's a consistent shape. So it's not like the regular bamboo that's hard to work with because it's always different. So this is the bike that we just launched at the Hand-Built Bike Show a few weeks ago, called the Semester Bike. We did a Kickstarter campaign, raised about $60,000. And what we're trying to do is get this bicycle thing going to create jobs in this area of Alabama. It's a crazy folding prototype. And here's the newest one, which we showed at the bike show, which is using this bamboo weave like a basket, and it's over a carbon core, which is even lighter than the other one. And we're looking at skateboards as well. They have a balsa core. So, the lesson here is, but the activity of making stuff has really informed our process. We never thought we'd end up, when we started NADA, with bamboo woven skateboards. And it's been kind of a really interesting process we've taken. So bet small. This is Alex Boguski sitting next to me. We got together a few years ago. And he was coming out of advertising, and he had it, and I was coming out of design. And the way I describe it, we were resonating at the same harmonic frequency. We both wanted to use what we knew how to do and our networks and our sort of knowledge to create positive change in the world. I'm going to show a video that Alex produced for the TED conference a couple years ago. It'll give you an overview of what we came up with, and I'll fill in the pieces.
Drop a stone in a bucket, and the ripples radiate out. In a big enough bucket, this expansion of energy seems endless, until those ripples hit the edge of the bucket. Then, in an instant, all that energy is moving in the exact opposite direction. We have hit the edge. The planet is finite. What was once frugal is now wasteful. What was once business as usual must become business as unusual. My name is Alex Boguski, and I've spent most of my life building brands. I got good enough at it that the biggest corporations in the world asked me to shape their brands. Honestly, I loved it. But a couple of years ago, I started to notice that the rules of business were suddenly changing, almost running in reverse. So I left my agency to get down to the business of imagining a future. I partnered with a friend, Rob Shuham, and my wife, Hannah, and we started the Fearless Cottage to explore the potential for a new agreement between consumers and corporations, an agreement that more fully empowered the largest and most powerful economic force in the world, the consumer. We must have struck a chord because thousands of people came forward asking how they could get involved, but we were stuck talking about the problem. Modern brands are worth billions of dollars, representing up to half of the company's total value. But even the most progressive companies can't share that value. The benefit of brand value only accrues to the company itself, not to society, not to the environment, and not to generations of the future. Why? What would happen if a brand could be shared just like any other asset? So we had to ask ourselves, what would you do if you could do anything? The answer to that question created Common. Common will unlock that value. Common is 1 part community, 1 part business incubator, and 1 part collaborative brand. Common is designed to bring people together, unleashing their creativity to rapidly prototype and launch hundreds of mutually supportive businesses, and doing all this under a shared brand. A brand that's community-owned and community-directed, offering huge brand value to the small social entrepreneur. Someday soon, a startup social venture in some far-off corner of the world will be able to launch their business with the immediate global awareness of a brand that represents a shared purpose, shared goals, shared means, and shared values. A single brand encompassing products, businesses, and the ideals of its community. Common may be the first collaborative mark, but in the spirit of collaboration, we hope it's just the first of many.
So I'll give you a little background on that. So our big, bold challenge was how do you reshape capitalism? And this is Alex's slide, which I really like. You can tell who's in power by the height of the building. So you once had castles, cathedrals, capitol buildings, and now corporate office towers are by far the tallest. Usually the one now in the previous in power works for the one now in power. And you can see it happening in the US now. So it's like, okay, if capitalism and business is really driving what's happening in the world, how do you shape that? How do you change it? How do you make it work for us in a positive way? So we had read a book by Umar Haque called The Manifesto for New Capitalism, and we're inspired by that. And how could you go from disposability, secrecy, competition in the individual to sustainability, transparency, collaboration, and community? So how could you embed these core values? Because right now, I'm sure you all know that there's no kind of shared value system for corporations other than short-term shareholder value, right? That's why they're designed to exist. And if there are companies like Patagonia, it's only by chance because Yvon Chouinard kind of has control of that company. So we're saying embed these core values and invent this brand that was not protected by a trademark, but was open source. We call it the collaborative mark. And so we came up with this idea of common. So this would be an open source brand. And the best way to think about it is like Virgin, right? So Virgin exists across over 300 different product categories. But all the value goes back to Branson and Virgin, right? We said, well, what if there was a brand that could exist across anything, common taco, common software, common design, didn't matter. But it was really owned by the community and anybody could use it and it would be policed by the community. So that's kind of our small bet. It's still in motion. We did common pitch events with social entrepreneurs. Now we just opened a common marketplace and we'll see where it goes. We don't really know, but it's worth a try. The last one, move fast. This is kind of taking what you've learned, trying these small bets, and kind of making this flywheel of momentum going forward. Back to Project M, one of the things I do at the beginning, which is part of the Think Wrong process, is we go around and I go reveal a hidden talent that nobody knows. And somebody would be I was a tennis champion, or I can juggle flaming clubs. And we then see if we can take that talent and kind of bring it into the project. This girl, Rosanna in the white sweater, was really into pie. And I just thought that was so stupid. Like, it's not a talent, being into pie isn't a talent. But this happened to be in March, and the next day was 3.14, so PI, March 14th, and they decided to do this event called Free Pie. This is in 2009, so it was right after our housing bubble collapsed. People were freaked out about the economy, and they said, well, we're just going to bake all these pies and have coffee on the street of this little town in Maine, and it's just our gift to the community, really not knowing what would come of it. So they produced this event all in like 48 hours, and it was a huge success. Newspapers, television covered it. All these people came. They said there's something here about gathering people to have conversation over pie and coffee. So half of them went down to Alabama, took over half of our studio. We had a little studio building down there, and opened up this thing called Pie Lab for the summer. It was intended as a pop-up experiment for them. They had $600 to use, and they built pie boxes and tables. They built just one table. This is a deeply segregated part of the country, so there are black churches, black restaurants, white restaurants, and they never sit at the same table to have a meal. And so we said, no takeout, one table, and opened up the doors. It was a big success, and I think mostly because it was built by outsiders. There was no pre-existing code of who could go in there. Archie and Brian were two of the designers. That was a big success that summer, and so they got a hold of this. It's right across the street from our bike lab on Main Street, Greensboro, Alabama. One of the reasons we love it down there is because there's no real code enforcement. Things are so cheap. You can decide, we're going to do this, and you just get a hold of a space for virtually no money. That's what it looked like when they took over. That's the crew. This is August in Alabama. It's like 115 degrees. The hardest thing was leveling the floor, and they had to get under the joists and stuff. Almost everything had to be either free or donated. We had done a Kickstarter campaign, got $8,000, but $6,000 went to the heating air conditioning system. We got this wood for free from sharecropper cabins, and made these big rolling walls that could redefine the space. We made tables, this was waste Alabama cedar we got for free. That's what it looks like now. And you can see how ingenious they were with low budgets and creating something that's really cool that didn't exist before. This is what it looks like inside. Those chairs we stole out of a school. We got in trouble for it, but it was in an abandoned school. We climbed in the window and took the chairs. We came in second in the James Beard Awards for restaurant design this year. And James Beard Awards are like the Academy Awards for the food business, which was really great. We lost out to the Guggenheim restaurant. And now it's a full service restaurant. We bake pies and have coffee and lunch and breakfast and dinners. And we also are employing the girl on the left there is in the youth build program where she's earning her high school degree and learning a trade, and she gets paid as well. We have tour buses. The New York Times did an article, CBS News, Al Jazeera. We've gotten a lot of press about this, and so all kinds of people come there now. It's become sort of the economic hub of Main Street now. We have pie baking contests and open mic nights as well. So the Main Street, when we first put in Pie Lab, had probably 70% boarded up, and now it's really a thriving downtown. It's hard to find a place to park. 2 weeks ago, I got contacted by CBS News, and they're considering Hale County, Alabama is one of the most influential zip codes in America, which is just incredible. So thank you very much. If you want more information, there are a couple websites, the Future website and Project M Lab. Thank you.